The first item will be election of board officers and appoint a secretary for 23-24.
I'd like to make a motion to appoint Chris president, Scott vice president, and Nikki secretary.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, that passes. Is there any public comments? All right.
Was there any emails received
No.
prior to 3:30?
All right, so now on to the consent agenda. So it's the regular meetings of the June 7th meeting, the closed session of the Board of Directors of June 7th, the MSCPA meeting on May 4th, and also the work session on May 23rd. We also have the departmental reports for the operation reports and financial statements from May, bills and accounts ending June 30th, and the power supply cost projections. Anything need to be brought out and talked about separately?
Nope.
I have a motion.
Motion to put the minutes and the departmental reports on file.
Support.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. Now we'll get to the regular agenda. First thing is the electric cost of service study and the telecommunications financial projections. I think we have a online person. Is Dawn there?
Yes, yes, hello. Good evening. Thank you for having me. So you have the presentation in front of you. I probably don't need to share my screen then, but just a little bit about our firm. My name is Dawn Lund. I'm Vice President of Utility Financial Solutions, and I appreciate you having me here tonight to present the results of the cost of service study and the telecommunications study. Our firm does cost of service studies, rate designs, and financial projections for utilities across the country, Canada, Guam, and the Caribbean. So I'm here tonight to present the results of the cost of service study on the electric side, and I'll talk briefly on telecommunications. Both utilities are in really good, healthy shape. We just need to make sure we're moving targets in the right direction, especially in the electric utility, as I'll go over that real briefly now. Before I get started, do you guys have any questions or comments though?
One thing, I guess, as you're explaining this, just can you explain it so that our citizens do understand why we're doing this? A lot of us here understand what we're trying to do, but sometimes our citizens may not have as much detailed knowledge. So I think any little bit of tweaking or just giving things for them to understand would be great.
Okay, awesome. Yes, thank you. Thank you for that guidance. So we'll look at that first slide. I did see that summary up there. Do you, perfect. So what this is, it's a very highly summarized table of about 100 spreadsheets. We look at very detailed information for you in the electric department. And we look at not only financial statistics, like where you are financially today and where we think you're moving into the future and where we think you should be moving, but we also take what's called revenue requirements, where we determine how much revenue you should be receiving from your customers. And we do a very detailed allocation study where we put costs in buckets, if you will, to help us determine the proper customer charge to charge and the proper kilowatt hour charge and the proper demand charge for your commercial and industrial customers and so forth. So the process that you go through is trying to make sure you're fairly and equitably receiving revenues from your different customer classes, while at the same time ensuring that you're keeping the utility healthy and moving it in the right direction for long-term financial sustainability. So this first table here, again, it's a table of about 100 spreadsheets rolled up in here, but it's a very powerful table. It can tell us where you are financially, and we've already been through all this with staff, reviewing the detail, making changes, looking at sensitivity analysis. But you can see the yellow highlighted there is showing the table without any rate adjustments. And I'm going to focus on 3 key targets that help determine if a rate adjustment is needed. So if we go to the 4th column over, debt coverage ratio is the title there. 2 more columns after that, the 3rd column after that is adjusted operating income. I'm going to talk about that. And the 3rd key target I'm going to talk about, of course, is 2 more columns over your projected cash balance. So I want to talk about what each of these mean. Let's start with basically that middle column, operating income. If I'm fully funding operating income, I'm fully funding everything I should be in the system. I'm funding my expenses, my depreciation, my proper rate of return, which is basically a break-even rate of return for a municipal utility. It's a very low rate of return. And you can see that that column currently is projected for the next fiscal year to have about a $519,000 operating income. If you were to fully fund the system, funding everything you should be to provide the services to your customers, you would fund that on average of about $1.8 million. That's only about a 4% rate of return. In general, we expect for an average depreciated system, electric system, to fund about a 4 to 6% rate of return. So you're on the very low end of that. You can see that throughout the projection period, without any rate adjustments, that operating income would turn to negative, a loss. You would be operating at a loss. I want to remind you here that the electric utility is an enterprise fund. It should be funding its own expenses, its own debt, its own ability to replace capital. So certainly we don't want the utility to operate at a loss. So that's one target we see over time without rate adjustments deteriorating. Let's focus on that cash balance, 2 more columns over. You can see that without any rate adjustments, the cash balance is projected to be about $8.8 million. We want that minimum to be closer to about $12 million. And of course, you can see throughout the projection period with the losses as well as the capital improvement program, you have projected your cash balance would deteriorate. I'm going to review one more target and then we can go over questions. That first target, the 4th column in, debt coverage ratio. All that is a measurement of debt affordability. Can I afford the debt we have in the system? You don't have a lot of debt. You've got about half of your net book value has debt against it. So that's about a 50% debt to equity ratio, which is good. And your debt coverage ratio, you can see there, our target in general for a revenue bond, your legal covenants are a 1.25, but for financial planning purposes, we'd like you to meet more like a 1.45. You can see that you've got a pretty healthy debt coverage ratio until that last year there. So we want to be a little bit careful with that target. What this table is basically showing you is without any rate adjustments, the key financial targets are deteriorating over time. Do you guys have any questions on the targets before I talk about the minimal rate adjustments that would be needed to help smooth out these targets?
No.
Okay, we can go to the next slide then. So on the next slide, what you're going to see is rate adjustments. All I'm trying to do here is put in a very minimal rate adjustment. These are the smaller rate adjustments that we're actually seeing across the country. You do have something called a PCA, a power cost adjustment, that is helping to really stabilize your revenues in periods of changing power supply expenses. So you've got that really good financial safety factor in there, so it can keep your rate adjustments minimal. For 2024, that's all we're looking at today, but we do like to get the board aware of, we don't want you to think about you can do one rate adjustment and you're done. This is an ongoing process as costs change. So we do have a 2% in that 2024 year, followed by some minimal rate increases after that. You can see the targets that I've talked about. The debt coverage ratio gets you more up in the 2.5 range, which is a very healthy debt coverage ratio. Our operating income, about that middle of the table there, stabilized to right around almost $2 million or something under $2 million. So it's stabilizing that operating income so it doesn't turn to a loss. And of course, that cash balance column, 2 columns after that, those cash balances, I'm trying to stabilize that and meet my minimum in that 4th or 5th year. Actually, that minimum cash balance is very low. It's only about a 90-day minimum cash balance. I like to see that a little bit higher. In general, bumping that up even a little bit higher. So what I'm trying to say here is this is a minimum rate track. We're trying to make sure we're being as fair to our ratepayers as possible. However, keeping our targets moving in the right direction. So before I go on to the next slide, which is going to show you impacts by rate class and dollar impacts by rate class, do you guys have any questions on the key targets or what we're trying to accomplish here?
No.
So we can go to that next slide. What this next slide is going to show you is rate impacts by customer. In general, we tried to be very sensitive in the rate design to that customer charge. The cost of service study did show that your customer charges could increase. However, we're trying to balance that with rate impact to your customer. So we were very sensitive to that monthly customer charge and all of these rate designs here. But let's just take in general that first line. Our overall goal, if you recall, is for a 2% revenue adjustment. But what a cost of service study does is it tells us if any classes are subsidizing other classes or being subsidized. And we try to correct that in the rate design slowly over time. So if you look at this table and look at the very far right column, that's the cost of service adjustment. You can see that the cost of service shows in the rate design, we're meeting the overall, or we would need to meet an overall of 2% rate adjustment. If we were to do this perfectly, and this is not what we're doing, but if we were to do this perfectly, you can see that the residential customers would actually see a greater increase than the rest of the rate classes. What I do with this is I try to work you towards cost of service slowly over time without creating any rate shock to any one particular rate class. So in this example, the residential customer would see about a $3.60 rate impact monthly rate change. That's about a 4% rate adjustment in the residential area. The cost of service, let's go back to the cost of service results real quickly here. In general, you're very close in all classes. You've done a very good job of keeping up with your cost of service, keeping up with financial projections, but also in your rate design, historically, you've been very sensitive to your residential ratepayers, as well as your other classes. So the cost of service is showing that slightly, that the residential class could sustain a little higher rate increase than the overall average. So the residential class would see about a $3.60 rate increase. And you can see how the rest of, that's your largest number of customers on the system. And you can see how the rest of the rate classes would be impacted. I think we changed the customer charge in the rate class only about 25 cents and then put the rest on the variable component for the kilowatt hour charge. So the customers would have the ability to have a little bit more control of how the rate impact affects them according to their usage. Do you guys have any questions on this table? Or what we're trying to accomplish?
No question.
Okay. So I'm going to briefly touch on telecommunications. You're in decent shape there. There's no retail rate change needed this year. We did change the allocation to make it a little bit more fair of what the water, wastewater, and electric departments are paying for their service in this area. So we did target a 5% overall increase in revenues to the telecommunications department. And again, that's no retail rate change. That was simply the internal allocations to electric, water, and wastewater to more accurately reflect the service they're getting. So in general, you guys do a great job of looking at this to make sure you're fairly and equitably receiving the revenues from your customer like you should be, and keeping the utility on track. I do think we, of course, need a very small rate adjustment in electric. You can see if we do nothing, we don't want to be, in a somewhat healthy position to getting into an unhealthy position by doing nothing. These are minimal rate increases. Again, we're seeing much higher across the country for rate increases. And a big part of that is you do have your PCA in place. You're using it, and it's working for you. So we can keep these rate increases to a minimum. So do you have any questions for me at all?
I do. I guess I don't understand why, when we're looking at why we would do a 4% for residential and not in the other categories. I mean,
Excellent
I
question.
see our families get hit the hardest.
So let's go back to that table. If you could move back 2 slides, please, that would be great. Yep, perfect. Thank you so much. So let's look at this table, and let's look at the very far right column, and that's the cost of service results. Again, we're not doing it this way, but if we were to perfectly put this in to fair and equitable rates for all ratepayers, you would need the very bottom of that table, far right column, a 2% rate adjustment overall. However, if we were to do this perfectly, you would see a 14.4% rate increase in residential. So we're not doing that. The next category, the general light, would see a 9.2% rate increase, and so far down on that chart, okay? So what a cost of service does is it tells you, are we fairly and equitably receiving the revenues from our rate classes according to the costs they're using? What this table shows is, in general, each of the classes are pretty darn close. Of course, not everybody uses perfect patterns year to year to year. So what we do is we take 10% plus or minus that 2% and say, anything out of 12%, I'm adding 10 to the 2, or anything under like a -8 would be, in general, we might kind of consider that out of cost of service. Now, when we do that, you can see that there's one class that particularly that only meets those requirements that I just talked about, and that's the residential service class. You've always been sensitive to your residential class, as many utilities are across the country. But when we start being sensitive over time, what we see is sometimes the cost of service can get a little bit out of line, where we might need to kind of rein that back in a little bit. And that's what we're doing in this year. We're saying, all right, anything out of 12%, we need to kind of bring that back in within that range a little bit. And what that would mean is that the residential class would see a slightly higher increase than the rest of the classes. We're completely following cost of service. And again, a cost of service study tells you, are we fairly and equitably getting the revenues we should be from our customers by rate class? So that's an excellent question. That's why the residential customers are seeing a little bit bigger impact this year on the rate design. It's because we kind of need to pull them back in more within that range for equitable revenue recovery.
Yeah,
Good question.
I think a couple of years ago, the residential had a much higher cost of service, and we tried to bring it in, kind of balance it out throughout all the classes. So it's still out of balance, but we're slowly getting it there. That was 2 or 3 years ago, I think.
And that's what we recommend over time. We don't want to cause rate shock to any one class, but we do need to keep working on it. We do need to keep slowly doing this over time.
Okay, thank you.
Good question. Any other questions?
It's a dumb question, but what's the outdoor lighting service? Who's in that fund? Who does that pertain to?
Those are just rental lights
Okay.
or any type of lighting that is outside of that. That's where your lighting will fall into.
Great. Any other questions?
I don't see any.
Well, let me say thank you, Don. If you can hold on just for 1 second while we go ahead and move forward with the next item on the agenda, which is the actual approval of the rate adjustments and the passing on to the City Council under Resolution 23-60 to go ahead and put these into effect starting September 1 is when we're looking at that. And the reason that we're doing it now is because it needs to go to City Council, sit for 30 days before it comes in, and then that'll give us time, if City Council approves us, to go through and make sure that we make all the changes in the billing system as well too. And in front of you, you have the proposed rate changes. You have all of the red line versions of what we're looking at and what we're talking about. And all the percentage that Dawn has gone through are reflected in the pages that you have in front of you. And like I said, what Dawn had mentioned, we are trying to be fair and equitable to all of our customers to make sure that everyone is paying their fair share of the proposed rate increase. And that's why we do have that little bit of discrepancy between all of the different rate classes. So I'd be happy to answer any questions or defer them to Dawn if you have any other questions on this, but I'd be asking for a motion to approve Resolution 23-60 and approve and send it to City Council for their July 10th meeting.
I did have one question on the power adjustment, power cost adjustment, but we're budgeting 1.4 cents for next year. Is that going to be like the average?
On the PCA?
Yeah.
So the PCA will still vary,
Mhm.
going up and down based on what the actual industry is still doing. Right now, we're not recommending to increase what our base number is for that, which is 6.7 cents-ish. And then, so based on, depending if we go up or down, we'll adjust our PCA accordingly just to make sure that we're collecting what we need to as far as revenue, and every rate class has that in there to take on that little bit of more of a variable cost that we're seeing on a monthly basis.
Our target's still 0, then we'll adjust based on the
Yes,
actual.
yeah, we'll
cost.
go up or down based on what the average cost is. And that's one of the things that we had talked about in the study as well too. Do we look at changing the PCA at this time, the base cost, or do we go ahead and let it go through another year and determine how the market's going to react accordingly and then adjust it in the future?
Any other questions from the board? All right, so I will need a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve the new rate.
Support?
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, passes.
Thank you, Don.
Thank you, everybody, and have a good evening. Thank you.
All right, next on the agenda is the Water Resource Recovery Facility disc filter upgrade. John Foley's on the podium.
Good evening, board members. Hope you had a safe 4th. I see John Millette still has his fingers. Okay, this proposal, so an aqua disc that we have is a buffer filtering system to catch floatable solids before it hits our UV system. We must do that. If not, we will damage our UV system. Well, we started doing some maintenance to them, and as soon as we touched one item, it started spin rolling. Another one broke, another item broke here or there. So I've had Aquarobics put this quote together to replace all internal parts on them so we can start from scratch from the beginning. My workers will do the work. In the quote, there was for a service guy that is needed so we can go from old-fashioned floats for level control in 3 of them, go to a level transducer. We put new controllers in all those back in 2018, and at the time it wasn't price effective. So at this time it is. So as you can see, I got some pictures up there of what I was talking about, the upper picture. That is the floats, the level transducers, and the 2 lower items. Those are, the one to the left is a pneumatic actuator for backwashing purposes. We will switch it over to the right, ones on the right to electric. A lot easier to operate maintenance wise. The ones to the left, those are the original when they were put in 2019 or 1999. Those were put in. So I think they have outlasted the item for what they were for. So, but I would request the board to approve this acquisition. And it's one of the, if I could have budgeted it, I would have. It just happened. So, unforeseen.
Was this the company that originally installed it?
It is, and
99?
all the parts are proprietary. So I wish. I would like to shop around, but I can't.
Okay, it would be much more expensive to go with somebody else and
Sure.
you'd have to replace more.
Yes. Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
And once you get the parts, how soon before it can be installed and
Once I get the parts coming my way, I can go ahead and rip off all the old cloth and be ready. So as soon as the boxes come, slap them on. I've already requested a couple other employees from another department to help out. So it was going to keep going. You're probably looking about 2 weeks time. So, and this will also help us achieve if we go to finally get re-rated up to 4, this will help tremendously for us to be able to stay under limits on some items.
Any other questions? Do I have a motion?
Motion to approve the WRRF disc upgrade.
support?
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, thank you, John.
Yep, thank you.
All right, next is Andrew's going to talk about the Bennett Street Substation Circuit Redesign Project.
Thank you, Vice President Ohms, and good evening, members of the board. As you may recall at the last meeting, we had presented the Bennett upgrades for the relay panels. In order to support this project, we need to be able to backfeed a portion of our 8320 voltage system. Originally, that was fed from an old switchgear that was built in the 60s that has old electromechanical relays that are difficult to find replacements for, as well are just not accurate in their protection scheme. So we were originally looking at replacing that older switchgear with a newer, more modern switchgear, but due to cost and delays and lead times, we had looked at a different option. So we were looking at backfeeding that system with buses, with a string bus, essentially overhead conductor and normal circuit breakers. So we had gone out for bids for a 1200 amp 15 kV breaker and then a 2000 amp breaker. Both of those came back in with a low bid from Siemens at $80,053 and a lead time of 45 weeks. We had solicited bids from 3 vendors. As a note, Mitsubishi had let us know that they had 132-week lead times. So we did not end up getting a bid from them. So with that, I would be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Any questions? We'll need a motion to accept this redesign project.
Motion to accept this redesign project.
I'll support it.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? No. All right. Thank you, Andrew.
Thank you.
All right, next will be Tom Eldridge and the AMP GS payable reduction.
Good evening, Vice President Ohm and the board. What we're talking about today is the debt that we have on the AMP GS project. This is for those of you, I won't give the full long history, but this is a coal power project that did not happen. And it was stopped in the early 2010s, and we had to pay into this for the liability that was out there. So we took the hit in roughly 2014, and how we've been paying it off, us and the other members of AMP that were part of this project, was basically based on AMP's line of credit. AMP is very large, they have a very large line of credit, and they get a very good interest rate because it's, I believe, in the billions. And so we have financed this rate through their line of credit over the years, a real good interest rate. Historically, however, during times like we're involved in right now, where we have overall high interest rates, their line of credit has increased. And so right now, their line of credit rate went up to 6%. The amount of money that we're earning in our investment accounts, mainly Michigan class, has also gone way up in the last year, but it's more like 5.25%. So there is a difference. We have about $890,000 left on this. We've been most recently paying $30,000 a month. The plan would be to increase the payments from $30,000 a month, $60,000 a month. And what that does is it really saves us some interest. It pays the debt off by roughly September of 2024. If we don't make the change and we continue to pay the $30,000, we'll have it paid off in 2025. I believe it's the spring of 2025, but we'll have paid more interest on it. So this is essentially like us making an investment. We're just making an investment by paying down debt versus, buying a treasury bond. So I would recommend that we make this change. And just as an FYI, this doesn't, even though we're paying more and we're getting more, this shows up on our monthly power bill, this gets backed out. And so it does not have anything to do with the PCA. It doesn't have anything to do with the rates of our customers. It simply is a kind of an add-on to that bill.
Any questions for Tom? Okay, seeing none, I need a motion to increase the payments from 30 to 60,000 per month.
I'll make a motion to make the change.
I'll support it.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, thank you. Thanks, Tom. Next thing, we have to establish the meeting dates for the next fiscal year.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. In front of you, you have the recommendations for the meeting dates, which is the first Wednesday of every month. If there's any questions on that, please let us know. If not, we're looking for a recommendation and approval of Resolution 23-03 to set the meeting dates for next fiscal year.
So moved.
Do I have support?
Support.
All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Now, next on the agenda is Brian Musselman will talk about the new streaming lounge. Did see something on Facebook today, so.
Well,
It was done very well, yeah.
All right.
Yeah. They're getting the word out quite well.
Well, we'll see how fast and furious it goes. So we're excited. We're happy to get this started finally. It opened today. I don't think we have any appointments yet, but we're going to try to get the word out by making appearances at Burnside and some of the other places around, let people know that we're out there, we can help. For all us old people that are afraid to switch from our cable to streaming, including me. We'll teach them how to stream, what devices they can use, what platforms they can use to stream, and all the ins and outs to help them save money if we can. We have 3 different ones there right now. We just kind of picked 3 of the most popular: Roku, Amazon Fire Stick, and Apple TV. Not that that's the only thing people can use, but that's some of the bigger ones that we have. It's located at the Enoch Building at 168 Division. It's actually in the entryway. We put Pat and his guys put a big TV up there. We got everything wired up. We got some plants and some posters to make it look nice and welcoming. You can make appointments Monday through Friday from 10 to 2. We estimate that each appointment will take about an hour, depending on how savvy the customers are. As everybody knows, we're going from cable's a dying thing and streaming's the next thing. So we want to make our customers feel that they can do this and we can help them on the way. So when we do installs, we'll tell people about it. We'll try to get the word of mouth out through Facebook and other appearances and things that we do to try to get some people to come in, see what we can do. Any questions?
I'm assuming that's free. There's no cost.
Yes, it is free, unless you want to tip me, then that's welcome.
Do we have a time schedule when Skidder will be officially cut off?
We have a date that we have to notify them by, and it's before 2025.
We're just
June
trying to-
15th of 2025, I think, is the actual cutoff date or the renewal date. So we have to notify them a certain amount. There's different languages all over, so me and Paul have been talking about it. Different time frames and dates, so we want to make sure we hit it right. So I need to comment on that.
Yeah, we're also currently, and this will be a push starting here shortly, is coming up with an exit strategy for getting out of the cable TV business. So we're working with our community engagement and our telecommunications department to figure out what's going to be the best strategy moving forward to make sure that our customers are well informed of when this is going to occur, but also what the options are out there for them. Truly hoping that they all switch over to our fiber service and then start streaming, but we understand that not everyone's going to be comfortable doing that.
Any other questions for Brian?
All right, thank you.
Any public comment? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to new business, which is, I believe, the director's report.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. So first on the director's report is the PCA for the month. This month is going to be 0.0071, and for the secondary, 0.00731. Looking at long-term gas pricing, we're still in the $3 to $4 range over the next 10 to 18 months. Just recently, last week, we had a meeting with the AMP folks regarding AFEC, which is the Fremont Energy Center Combined Cycle Natural Gas Plant. And we also, at that meeting, we approved some gas hedging that they were looking at based on some analysis done by their power broker. So we're looking at 26 through 30, so 2026 through 2030, roughly hedging about 8.8 to 9% of the gas at what they're looking at as a lower price than what market they project market to be. And then also another hedge of another 6% in the 28 to 32 range. So more to come on that. I'd love to give you the pricing, but it's proprietary. So if you want to know more about that, please let me know. But it does look like it's going to be less than what market is projected, but we all know how markets change on a daily basis. On personnel side, Brent Summerlot has completed his mandatory 7,000 hours and has received a certificate of completion of his apprenticeship program from the Department of Labor. He is now officially a journeyman lineman. So if you see him out and about, please congratulate him on that. In addition, Brian Massey has obtained his D1 water operator certification from Eagle. So if you see him out and about, please congratulate him as well. Just a reminder, Entertainment Under the Stars starts on July 18th, starting at 7 p.m. over at Heritage Park. It'll continue through August 22nd. CBPU is sponsoring August 1st, a concert with Pomegranate Whiskey Band. So don't forget to bring your lawn chairs and come out and at least on August 1st, visit us because we'll make sure to make your day very enlightful. Just a reminder also, the MMEA conference, fall conference is September 19th through the 21st up at the Northern Michigan University's Northern Center in Marquette. And if any board members wish to get more information about that, please let Nikki know, as well as if you are planning on attending. And then we also got a thank you letter or thank you certificate from the BACC regarding our participation in helping them with the on-the-job training program. And that is my report. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Any updates on having Wi-Fi downtown for events?
I actually had discussed that earlier with Audrey as we're looking at some of the streetscape stuff. We're looking also to see if there's a way to incorporate that with the banner that's going, or the metal sign that's going over Monroe. So more to come on that as well. We're also going to be looking at, and Brian doesn't know this yet, but we're going to be scheduling a meeting to discuss the future pushing of Wi-Fi in our parks as well as the downtown. So it's on the agenda to be looked at and determine what's going to be the most cost-effective way to do that.
Great, thanks.
All right, any other questions? Date of the next meeting?
Wednesday, August 2nd. Don, I think
I will
you're,
not, I'll be out west.
everybody else okay for August
Yeah.
2nd?
For sure. Now we need to move into closed session to discuss negotiation of the collective bargaining agreement.
I'll make a motion to go to closed session.
Support.
And we'll need a voice roll call.
Vice President Ohm,
Yes.
Member Mackin.
Yes.
Member Willett,
Yes.
Member Whelan.
Yes.
And Don, we will be coming back out to vote on something. That's the plan anyway.
All right.
Okay, just hold
So-
one second until that goes away.
Oh, okay.
Okay,
All right. I'll call the meeting back to order. Do we have a motion?
Move to approve the tentative agreements, TAs, settled upon between the City of Coldwater, Coldwater Board of Public Utilities, and the United Steelworkers, USW, Local 14178, and authorize President Stevens and Director Jakubczak to sign the collective bargaining agreement, CBA, upon final legal review.
Support.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, it passes. Thank you. Is there any other business? All right, I will move to adjourn. Thank you.
No, thank you.